All right. Thank you all so much for coming to Woman Up. We're so excited to host all of you, and for those of you who came to our competition yesterday, thank you so much. It was amazing, and it wouldn't have been what it was without you. We're currently live streaming the event, so for those of you who might be on Facebook right now, apologies if the sound is weird, but we are also recording everything. So if the live stream is weird, just wait a day or two and we'll have this all up and running on the internet for you in the future. So just to kick off this panel, I want to just do a big thank you, especially to our sponsors, the North Face, for helping us make this happen. Thanks to all of the folks who ran the clinics, Alex Puccio, Nina Williams, Emily Taylor, Heidi Wirtz, Anna Pfaff, Lynn Hill, Beth Rodden, Natasha Barnes, and a big thank you, of course, to our route setters for helping make this happen. Jackie for running that show. Thank you. So a big part of this event has been about creating space to talk about specifically women's experiences in rock climbing. These are conversations that are sort of just now being able to come to the front. And we are so excited to have this incredible panel of ladies here to talk about their numerous experiences in all aspects of the climbing industry. And I'm going to give them a chance to introduce themselves. And then we have a couple of prepared questions just to sort of get the discussion going. And the last half hour, we'll open it up to the floor. So as you guys are hearing these wonderful folks talk about their ideas and their feelings, if you have any of your own, keep them in your back pocket and then raise your hand. We'll be able to get going from there. All right, without further ado.
Hi, everybody. My name is Anna Pfaff, and I'm here with the North Face.
Hi everyone, my name is Shelma, and I'm the founder of Flash Foxy and the Women's Climbing Festival. I've also recently started a new production company called Never Not Collective with 3 other women of the outdoors.
Hi, I'm Lynn Hill, and I'm really happy to be here and to see all the enthusiasm for women. This is like the first in the history of my experience as a climber that there has been a women-specific festival, so I'm really happy to be here.
Hi, I'm Beth Rodden. I'm equally as excited. I think it's pretty amazing to see all of the community rally around this event, and I look forward to a lot more.
My name is Jackie Hueftle. I'm the head route setter at the Spot in Boulder. I've been setting routes for like 17 years. And it's really cool to see so many other women interested in climbing and setting because there were very few, and now there are many.
It's true. That's great. I'm Katie Goodwin. I work for the Access Fund as a public lands policy associate, so helping keep all of our climbing areas across the United States open. Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Give them a round of applause for being up here. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here. We really appreciate it. So just to kick off the discussion, it might be sort of an obvious question, but seems like the obvious place to start. How has gender experience affected your experience in climbing, particularly in different avenues? Because I know it's different for like comp climbing versus the outdoors in the gym, or even in route setting. Like those dynamics can sort of shift depending on the expectations. And I was just curious if any of you guys have any thoughts on how that's been for you. Yeah, and whoever just feels like jumping in or starting.
Yeah. Since I'm the oldest one here by far, she's the next oldest and I could be her mother. So I've been climbing for over 40 years. When I first started climbing, there were a few women involved, and luckily I had one really good friend, Mari Gingery, who I'm still friends with, and she still climbs. She lives out in Joshua Tree, and it was great to have another woman to compare beta with and to just be friends with. And it's so different now to see that sometimes I'm climbing at an area and there's more women than men, especially in sport climbing areas. Now, when you talk about trad climbing or alpine climbing, there are less. And my feeling on that is, well, women tend to be a little bit less risk-oriented because as the mothers, if you become a mother, we want to live to raise our children. So that's part of it. And I think women are not as interested necessarily in conquering and sort of like that achievement side as much as the internal experience of growing and learning and having fun with our friends. So that's sort of my general view of, the overall picture.
Well, I've been climbing a little less than Lynn, 23 years now. And when I started climbing, I was one of the first generation of kid climbers. Believe it or not, back then, gyms, there was probably 5 or 6 in the country. And again, there were a lot more boys than girls. There might have been, a handful of us girls out there. But now, I had somebody in my clinic today ask if I climb mostly with men still or with women, and I have to say, minus my husband and my neighbor, I always climb with women. So I think the community has grown, and it's really great to see.
And to agree with Beth on that, most of my climbing partners in the past 5 years or so, I've been climbing for probably about 15 years, have definitely gravitated towards all women, which is super cool and exciting. And also to add to what Lynn was saying, I am mainly an alpine climber, an ice climber, and in the past probably 5 years as well, there's been a large number of women getting more involved in that side of climbing as well, which is super, super rad.
I have been climbing the least of everybody, I'm pretty sure, on this panel. I've been climbing for about 5 years. And, climbing with women, meeting women is really what shifted my relationship with the outdoors. It really gave me the confidence to go out and try new things, to be bold in ways that I hadn't been before. And I think kind of to work a little bit off what Lynn was saying as well, is that there aren't as many women in the Alpine. And I think there is the aspect of women and motherhood, but I think it's also we haven't been told to go out and try it. That's not what we were told as kids growing up. We were told, slow down, be careful, don't get hurt, take a step back. Whereas a lot of boys, this is obviously a generalization, but a lot of boys have been told, go try that, it's okay, make a mistake, fall down, get back up, you can do it, go and be bold. And I think that women are slowly learning that we can be bold too, that we should be able to go out and try stuff. And seeing people like Anna and Lynn and Beth, going out and doing it, it's gonna show us that, maybe it's not my instinct to be bold, but actually I can do that and I can try that and I can make a mistake, and that's okay. And that's a really, really exciting time that I think we're in right now.
So I've been climbing for about 19 years, and I started in the same region as Beth. So Beth was the best rock climber in the world, basically, in all of our opinion, because she had done a 13A, and she was winning nationals, and we were all, there weren't very many girls, first of all. Before Beth, the strongest woman I knew in the gym, had top roped to 12B once, so my mental barrier was pretty low. And Beth did Warp Factor, and then that was my first 13A, and that was a really exciting project. And so it was definitely a mental box that has gotten bigger and bigger. I was raised in a family where I was expected to do things and enjoyed doing things, and my dad, I was always a tomboy, still am, and my dad had me doing things. So it wasn't for me the idea of doing things, but it was just finding my own strengths as a climber was a lot different. And that's why I think FFAs are really important, because I think that it shows other women what's possible. And it's hard to understand because, most first ascents in the world were done by men, and so they have that already. And for women, knowing another woman has climbed something, even if you're like me and you're super tall and most women are short or whatever it is, I think it's really helpful to expand that mental box and show what's possible, and then give you just the idea hey, I could do this, or maybe I could do this other one. And also female first ascents in the same way, not female first ascents, but a first ascent done by female first ever, I think are really cool, because it's women taking the next step of, hey, I put this thing up and I think it's V7, and then maybe the guys that are trying to think it's harder because it's a girl style problem for once, and that kind of flips the script on what normally happens with grading and the experience that we have.
Yeah. I might speak a little bit to the industry side of climbing that's really developing. And, I work for a nonprofit advocacy group. And I would say what we observe is it's still primarily men running the show on the advocacy side of things and industry side of things. And I know Access Fund has been working really hard to put more females on our board and hire more females. But I would say across the board, everywhere I work, it's probably it feels like 25% females. And so this spring we went to Washington, D.C., and Shelma was there. But, all day I had a great team with me, but it was me and like 8 men. And so I think that just across the board, it's kind of a reflection of that changing of the tide, and I think that it's on everyone's radar. So I hope that that starts to kind of balance out a little bit, because I think everyone's perspectives are really valuable.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that. We're definitely going to return to the FFA because I'm really curious about it. Would love to talk more about it. But since we're talking about the industry, Jackie, you and Shelma actually had an online interview like in 2015 that I unearthed it on the internet. So, in it, Jackie, you'd mentioned that you've come up against like a glass ceiling in the industry, particularly in the route setting industry. And since we're sort of already talking about that shifting dynamic in terms of where like the industry is still primarily run by men, even in advocacy, like what are some of the boundaries or like the barriers you've come up across, and like I don't know if you have any thoughts on like how we can start actually shifting that beyond just getting like, now that we have more women who are excited about it and seeing more women in it, you can start getting, a flood of folks interested and like asking, but there still seems to be like this sense that there's an upper limit to what you can achieve.
Yeah, okay, this is a multi-sided question. With route setting, it's definitely a boys' club in a lot of ways. It's difficult to start. It's a really physical job. It's exhausting. It's mentally challenging. And then strength is always seen as like the highest value. So it's like, oh, well, this guy's the strongest climber, so he's like kind of in the social structure of setting, tends to be on the setting crew. Everyone respects him because he's the strongest or whatever. But as the industry's changing, there's more women getting into climbing. There's more newer climbers getting into climbing. What women have to offer in terms of like teaching movement through route setting is a lot different and a lot more applicable to new climbers than the 5 boys on the crew that climb V13. Not that they can't empathize. I believe that a lot of them can, and it's a skill. But I think that having more women setting is really going to help gym culture introduce and retain new customers and get people into climbing and help them continue climbing. Because the old ethic was like, you got to be strong enough or you can't, which is why there's V0 minuses in Yosemite that no one can do. And the new ethic isn't that. Like, we want people to come to gyms and have a good time and learn fitness and learn movement and enjoy themselves. And it's infinite, the move that you could do climbing. And in a climbing gym, you can come in and you can climb for an hour or 2 hours. You can climb 30 boulder problems in a session. And if you're going outdoor climbing, that's not what happens. So it's just a different thing. And so we need to approach it differently. And part of that is incorporating more women of all abilities into creating the product that we're creating for this customer base and for ourselves to exercise on, so we can have the things that we value, teaching people, gaining fitness, having a good time, not necessarily injuring yourself, not feeling like you suck because you can't do this easy climb with huge moves between slopers. It's just like, it's a different thing now, and so we need to value all the different parts of that thing and work on incorporating those, and part of that's changing the social structure around strength being the primary value, because it isn't anymore. It's a value, and there's other things like technique. People used to say, oh, she's just technical. She can just do it because it's technical. I mean, I don't know if anybody here has ever seen to bolt or not to be, but it's not just technical. It's really hard. And you can, some people can learn technique and some people can't. Some people need to stretch to be able to do certain moves, and some people have bigger biceps. So it's just valuing all the different parts that make climbing exciting in other sports.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Lynn and Beth especially have things to say about strength versus technique, and this idea that like somehow the strongest climber is necessarily the best climber. Like, I don't know, if that's something that's come, especially when we're thinking about like Meltdown, which still hasn't seen a repeat. For those of you who don't know, Beth Rodden put up this, I think it's one of the 2 or 3 hardest trad climbs in the world in Yosemite. It's this heinous crack. And and it has still yet to see a repeat. And so I don't know if anybody here has any thoughts on that. I guess ways to sort of de-emphasize this idea that like strength is the most important thing about being a climber, and that sort of has priority.
Go ahead.
I was going to actually talk about the nose and what you did up there. So Lynn, you know everyone, she freed the nose like so long ago, and yeah, and I always, Lynn has been my hero, and I always said, oh my gosh, it's amazing that Lynn Hill freed the nose and no one else has, and it wasn't for lack of trying. You know, I was in Yosemite for those years, and the Hubers came, and UG came, and all these people came, and their excuse always was, oh, we have these big fingers, and we can't fit it in the great roof. And I was thinking, well, that's really interesting. And finally, you know, I had all these excuses too, and at the time I was with Tommy, and, you know, we were climbing together, and, you know, we were like, oh, the nose is always wet, and oh, it's always crowded. And at some point we were like, it's always gonna be crowded, and it's always gonna be wet. And we go up there, and Tommy's fingers are the size of sausages, and he was able to do it. And I just think that it's funny that all these guys had to come up with an excuse why they couldn't do the nose, instead of just saying, well, Lynn was just so ahead of her time, and what she did is so phenomenal, and we are so impressed. Rather than dumbing it down, they could have just really said it how it was, in that what she did was amazing, and it took over a decade for it to be repeated, and I think that that's really got to change.
Thank you. So, in case you didn't know, Beth has also free climbed the nose. And it was a proud ascent because she did it with Tommy, and they both free climbed it all. And so, you know, that was another step forward in climbing, to have both people do it free. I basically had a rope caddy that Jumar'd behind me and cleaned all the gear and like handed me the rack and basically was there for me. And it's true that I did hear, oh, she could do it because she had small fingers, and Tommy only has 9.5 fingers. So, but I always say to people, it's not about those details. It's about your spirit towards it. It's about your vision, and it's about adapting your body to the rock. So it's always about the mind first. And so I wanted to take this conversation in a little bit different direction and say that from a business standpoint, the men still are behind a lot of the companies. The Access Fund is not alone. The American Alpine Club, it's a boys' club, essentially. They're trying to bring more women into it, but it's our responsibility as women to create the possibility, because they're not just gonna hand it to you. They don't want to hand it to us necessarily, and that's a subconscious thing that's deeply rooted into people's culture. And so to make a change, you have to make a conscious change, and you have to say, I'm going to go after it, like Shelma did. She created something new, and people were happy to support it because they realized, wow, that's a great idea. Let's get women involved. Let's go with this, because there is an interest. Women, you know, as a business person would say, women are actually the ones that go out and buy this stuff. So they want to appeal to us. So we have to be ahead. We have to step ahead if we want to have that independence and have some control and build the structure around it. With women, working with women, and also with men. We should work together, because a balanced world is a better world. We need the feminine approach and the masculine approach. We need both. And it doesn't have to be a man or a woman. It's just a style. Women, you know, traditionally are more the caretakers and the more compassionate ones that support the social side of things, and men might be, you know, more interested in the bottom line and the business side. But we need each other, and we need to work together as a team. But, you know, the first step as a pioneer is about stepping out there ahead and having a vision and trusting that your vision is correct. And then, it's always going to be difficult. I had lots of problems trying to free climb the nose, trying anything new. And then you always question, oh, can I really do it? Is this crazy? And actually, here's a little small story about that. I came to Yosemite after free climbing the nose in 1993. I wanted to do a film project. And I had a producer over in France that was willing to come and film it, but they wanted somebody to work with in America. So I had it set up with this guy who actually, I won't mention his name to not embarrass him, but he went on to make a lot of films on Mount Everest, which was definitely an important project. But I think part of his lack of commitment to this project, which came at the last minute, oh, I'm not going to be able to be there, and it was because of the Everest thing. But part of it was that he wasn't confident that I was going to be able to do it. And you know what he said to me when I ran into him by chance at a trade show? He said, gee, do you really think you can do it? So how does that feel as a person on the edge of a breakthrough, trying to be visionary? It's like, wow. Then you question yourself. It's like, yep, I can do it. I'm going to see that vision through, and you've got to keep trying. Because, Murphy's Law on a big wall is like anything that can go wrong will go wrong. So you accept it and you say, okay, that went wrong, but it doesn't mean I failed. Your foot can slip, but you're not falling yet. Keep trying. So follow your vision through, even if it seems like it's really, really hard. You just got to keep trying.
That actually, it makes me think about Shelma, and I think it was Outside magazine, or maybe it was Climbing, where you were talking about sort of the difference between having, like, I think you're talking specifically about the first women's climbing festival down in Bishop last year, or was it 2 years ago? 2 years ago, sorry. And just that the difference between having like a crew of like all like women spotters and how different it feels like being up on a high ball and being scared, and just that how different that dynamic is. I'm sort of curious if you feel like there's a difference in gender dynamics, or if anybody experiences that on a climbing team. Like you were talking about how you felt like sort of more supported, and that there's just sort of like a different vibe about it, as opposed to like kind of this drive for like competition and like this sort of sense of ego like pushing you up the wall, and instead you sort of have this these folks are all here like for you to make you like feel safe and comfortable and like ready to push. I know especially for you, Anna, if you're on like a big expedition and you have a big crew of people, I'm curious if gender plays out a whole lot in terms of the dynamic, and if it changes your experience.
I think I've done expeditions that are both just all female expeditions and male and female expeditions as well. And I do think that there is a different dynamic that does play a role in each one. I can't exactly pinpoint what it is, other than the fact that when it's an all women's expedition, you're kind of all out there together, you're all on that phrase we use as the level playing field, which it is. And I'm not exactly sure why that happens and what happens when you just throw one male into the mixture. And it goes back to what Lynn was saying, that it's in our makeup of how we've been taught that we need to be careful or watch out, in that men are stronger and men should take care of the situation. And when it's just women, we're all in it together. When it's men and women, that dynamic is definitely there.
I just want to talk a little bit more about like the article you were referring to, which was in Climbing Magazine last year. And I think it's really about the fact that like a lot of differences between men and women, they're not physical. They're social structures that exist in our society that have been told to us and taught to us, and we all kind of are trying to figure out what those are so we can acknowledge them and break them down. So when I talk about like my experience climbing with men, it's actually not even what those men are doing. It's the kind of expectations that I'm putting on myself. This pressure to feel like I have to prove myself as worthy to be there, that like, that I deserve to be there, that I'm strong enough, that I'm, bold enough, that I'm not gonna cry or I'm not gonna be scared. I think that there's these expectations, and I think a lot of those expectations that we put on ourselves, these social pressures that we feel in mixed company can sometimes be evaporated when we take men out of the picture. And so I think a lot of what the Women's Climbing Festival is about is creating this is not like the end goal space, but a temporary space where women can come and feel free and kind of unrestricted from these social pressures that we might feel in everyday situations, to ask questions, to express our fears without any worry about how we're going to be judged, kind of with the hope that right now the way we value climbing, the way we value partnerships, how we measure success, how we measure challenges, those are all kind of created by the forefathers of climbing, who are men. And what I'm really hoping is that as we come together as women, maybe we're going to think and we're going to be able to discover different ways to experience climbing, and that's going to be really cool. And then we're going to be able to take that out back to where we go, and that climbing itself as a giant community that we are will shift to be a better representation of like the changing demographic. And that doesn't just mean women. I think climbing is changing in so many different ways. Like women, I think, is one of the most approachable topics when it comes to like intersectional feminism. But what we're doing here is helping to move everything forward for, the queer community, for adaptive community, for people of color. A lot of the assumptions that come around these communities are all coming from the same place. So if we can kind of start to break those barriers here as women, we're gonna see those ripple effects into all these other communities as well.
This might be a good place to segue back into the FFA, actually, because I don't know how many of you read Evening Sens, but there's this very controversial essay that Andrew Bisharat wrote a couple years ago about the FFA, and sort of claiming that it's primarily a participation award, like it doesn't really mean anything, and in fact it actually holds women back because then they sort of feel like they're getting this consolation prize for doing something second or fifth or something after a bunch of men. And I know, Jackie, you have strong feelings about this, and I'm sure everybody on this panel does, actually, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Well, I kind of said my main piece, which is I think it's important. Like when Lynn did the nose, she was, like she said, blowing a mental constriction, mental box out of the water as much as a physical one. And that's the most important thing I think about FFAs that doesn't really get discussed, is like the fact that for a lot of women it shows like, hey, a woman did this. And you don't have to do that same route, but you could. There's a route called Fisheye in Oleana, Spain, that's like 14C maybe. It's like the most climbed 14C, like 8 or 10 women have done it or something. It's like a lot. I think it's 14C, maybe 8C. It's 8C. Anyway, it's hard. But a lot of women have climbed it. And people might say, oh, it's a women's 14C, or they can do it because they can get through the crux because they're women or whatever. But it doesn't really matter, because you have to start breaking those mental barriers down for yourself. And if you do one, you might think you can do another one. And I just think that that's super important. And what Shelma was just saying, I mostly have always climbed with men just because there weren't very many women climbing. There were barely any women bouldering when I started. And you would see them and be like, oh my God, there's like another woman at the Buttermilks. It was like, there's just two of you there, basically. And you knew everybody at the Boulders also, which has really changed. But I think it'll be a good thing in the long run. So anyway, I think FFAs are super important. I don't know if we need to think of, Andrew traditionally writes controversial things because Andrew likes writing controversial things and exploring ideas in a public forum, which is fine. It's fine. But anyway, I just think it's really important. It's like there's this idea that something starts to exist in the ether, like, there's a skateboard trick that no one's ever done, and somebody lands it, and 3 other people across the world will land it in the same week. And it's never been done before. And I think that the same thing happens with climbing, and with our own mental barriers we place on ourselves and what we think is possible. So I think FFAs are really important for all of those reasons.
All right, I just want to make one clarification. FFA means first free ascent.
FFFA?
Well, I think you should just be specific and say first female ascent, because FFA is an old term, because I'm an old schooler. I have to clarify that. But on the topic, there are certain things like the first woman to climb Everest. For me, Midnight Lightning was a significant first female ascent because no woman had done it, and it was iconic. And when I first saw the Midnight Lightning Boulder, I didn't think I was ever going to be able to do it. And, one day, I came to Yosemite in, I think it was 1998, and I really wanted to do the first free ascent of the North American Wall, but it was the year of El Nino, and it was completely wet. So I had time to focus on the Midnight Lightning. I did top rope it first because I didn't want to break my ankles or anything on that mantle. But for me, it was kind of amazing. I'm not even really known for my bouldering, that I was the first woman to do that. And very quickly after that, Lisa Rands came on the scene, and she just bumped it up really quickly. And so it really was important for women to see that level was achievable, and you could take it much further.
And didn't somebody famous tell you there was no way you would ever do it?
Well, that's another story, but actually this guy in France, I came over to France in 1986, and I'll probably mention this again later on tonight, so this is kind of a famous story that the first comment he made was, "Oh, a woman will never on-site 7C," or that means 512D. And I looked at him like, who would ever say that? How could you possibly put your limit, because he thought it was difficult and he was struggling with it. He just a woman will never do it. And I didn't even have anything to say to him. I just kind of was like, really? And so my first 514 was actually on a route that he had done the first ascent of. And so it was kind of satisfying because he also said that a woman wouldn't climb 514. And then years later, this is kind of two ideas in one. So the first idea that came to mind just now is that my motivation is one of the most important things. If I have a really strong motivation, I'm going to try a lot harder. And if it's just to show off and, be kind of dismissive to someone, that's not as great as, really trying to make an impact and do something meaningful for the sake of other people, not just for your own ego. But I happened to be in Germany, and some good friends of mine came up to me and said, "Hey, did you hear about Wolfgang Gulick?" Who was kind of a hero of mine. He was, one of the first people to make really hard routes in the world. He did the first 513D, and then I think he skipped a grade, did the first 514 in the world, and he just kept going on. So he was a visionary guy, and I'd learned that day that he fell asleep at the wheel after doing an interview very early in the morning, and he'd just come back from, if you've ever seen that film Cliffhanger, he was the double for Sylvester Stallone, and he was just really tired, fell asleep at the wheel, and of course they drive really fast on the Autobahn, so it was very quick. He hit and never came back. That was it. And so he was kind of technically alive, but he was kind of a vegetable, so they were right at that point where they were going to turn the machine off, and that would be the end of his life. And so I thought, well, I know I'm on the cusp of being able to on-site 513B. So in French grade, it was 8A, so it was like that barrier. And I thought, I'm going to do it today because I want to do it in memory of this person, and I'm going to give everything I have, and I'm just going to believe in the meaning of this ascent. And so just so happened that Jibé was at the cliff that day, and he just had on-sighted this 8A. It was called Simon. And I turned around, I didn't watch him at all. The draws were in place, so it was a pink point, as technically, or no, not even a pink point. The draws were there. But I was able to on-site the climb that day, and I came down, and I didn't make a big deal about it. I didn't yeah! I was just personally very satisfied. And he goes, "Was that the first time you've ever done an 8A on site?" And I said, "Yep." So it was Jibé once again. So not only did I on site something, much harder than 7C, but I did it in front of him. Yeah.
It's a very satisfying story. But actually, I am sort of curious about grades in particular. There's been sort of some conversations around this idea of dude grades. How a lot of because so many men have put up a lot of the roots and problems and lines, they all sort of tend towards a very particular sort of masculine body. And then what ends up happening is, like, there's supposed to be this easy V4 that's this gigantic span to a sloper, and then something that might be a little bit easier, something small and crimpy and technical. You'll hear a lot of folks in Bishop be like, oh, well, it's like a girl V7 or something, as this kind of downgrading. And I was curious about the role grades have sort of played in your lives and at any level, and if you have any thoughts on how we might be able to sort of expand the way we think about them, so that it doesn't end up being this it's always going to be this issue between who first put it up or.
Well, I've done a lot of. I was thinking also about Shelma saying earlier about climbing with women versus men. I think in climbing you have to find your own reasons to climb, and you have to find your own motivation to climb, and you have to find your own justification for what you're trying and why for yourself. And it's hard sometimes because you think, oh, their project is more important than mine because they're stronger than me, whoever they are. But with grades, I find going places like Fontainebleau in France incredibly freeing because A, I don't really know what the grades relate to. I mean, you can figure it out, but isn't just in my head. And B, everything's hard, like everything. So you just kind of are like, okay, I'm gonna get spanked on everything. And I'm gonna try anything that looks cool because you might be able to do it. So it's good if you can find a place in your own climbing where you let go of grades. Because I don't have a super strong mental game like where Lynn or Beth might be like, oh, no one's done this, I'm gonna do it the first. I'm like, oh, no one's done that I probably can't do that, And I mean, I for a good example, I started out as a sport climber, and then I started going to Bishop bouldering, or in 1999, our friends were down there, come down to Bishop. We went down there, and the first day I was there, I did a V5 in the sad boulders. But I didn't remember that it was V5 or anything, and I got this mental barrier about V5 after that. I spent a season or two projecting another V5, and I did it, and I was like, oh, I climbed a V5 finally. And then I looked back, and I was like, oh, I did one my first day here. And I didn't know because I had this idea that it was really difficult for me at the time grade, which some V5s are still really hard. And in Fontainebleau, some V0s are really hard, or in Yosemite. So it's good if you can find your own, I don't know, and for women, I think a lot of times you just have to basically throw the guidebook out the window in terms of what the grades are. And I'm tall for a woman, and I'm good at compression climbing sometimes, so I have all that going for me, but I'm not very good at my biceps, and I'm not good at locking off, so it's a mix, And you have to just kind of accept that the grades are kind of a recommendation or an idea of how hard it might be for a certain group of people, and then just go from there and make up your own idea. So it'd be cool to make women's guidebooks for areas, common areas, because you can say, hey, most women think that Mr. Whitty is V5 in Bishop, but then every color you are is V8, even though they're both given V6 in the current guidebook, and they're next to each other. Or in Waco, there's 3 really famous V5s in the maze, and one's a slab climb, one is an overhanging kind of crimp thing, and then one of them is at least V7 for sure. It has a dyno at the end, it's scary, and they're just completely different climbs. And I don't think very many people would on-site all 3 of them of any ability range. And it just goes to show that they're just an idea. So you have to really find your own reasons for climbing and climb things that appeal to you and mean something to you or you think are pretty or whatever it is. And then also put value into that. So if you think this is the coolest looking climb here and it's V4 and it's a little bit hard for you, it's okay to work on that and succeed on it for your own reasons and because it's a cool thing, and don't think okay, well fine, my boyfriend dynoed through it. Whatever. He climbed in his tennis shoes, great. It just shows you that you need to overcome some mental and physical challenges to climb it yourself. It doesn't mean that you suck. It's just a different thing for you. And I try to explain that to women. And with route setting and forerunning is difficult because, again, the guys will dyno through or monkey through, skip sequences on routes, and it doesn't mean that you need to change the route. The idea of the route is for that grade of climber to have an experience on. It's not for somebody that's much stronger or way bigger and likes dynoing through everything to have their experience. It's a warm-up for them anyways. It's not for them. It's for other people. And so you want to focus on the people it's for. And in the same way, an outdoor, climb is for a certain group of people, but then you kind of make it your own. And the same thing in the gym, honestly. And also, one of the things that people used to say to me that I find really useful and I still say is, no one's going to give you a free t-shirt either way, so just it's for you, you know. And if you're in a gym and you're trying a problem and you're like, oh God, this thing really needs a foot, and there's a foot on another climb right there, and it would make your experience way better, just use it. Like, who cares, you know? I mean, so.
I was gonna say something, but I feel like Jackie just said like all of it. like all, like she just went. I was like, I guess I don't have to say that anymore. And in the end, like, you know, it really is like grades, like take it with a grain of salt and use it. Like I like to like have a general range of what I climb. Things are like, sometimes I'm projecting a V3, sometimes like the V6 goes on our first go. Like there's just a range, and it's really a way to track your own progress and challenge yourself. And you don't have to use it to like compare yourself to other people. And like also like if you're in the Alpine, like fucking grades go out the window anyways, because you're like, oh, I'm on this 5.4 on a knife edge ridge at 14,000 feet. Like, well, this feels really a lot harder than 5.4 now, doesn't it? So I mean, I think it's like, so it's a lot about taking it with a grain of salt, and also remembering that Alex Honnold would downgrade everything you climb anyways.
So I think we have time for one last sort of prepared question, then we can open it up to the floor for everyone. So in the presence of these just amazing women, it's just so, oh my God, I can't believe I get to sit up here and talk to you guys. I've been thinking a little bit about how the climbing industry has been changing, and particularly in terms of this huge influx of new climbers, which is super exciting. But I'm wondering a little bit about the mentorship model that it has been so important, I know, for myself especially, just having people, whether or not they're direct mentors who take you outside, you know, show you how to place gear, or take you to the gym for the first time and show you how to tie your figure eight. I feel like especially for women, it's so powerful to have somebody to look up to and to have a mentor. And now that there's so many folks in climbing, I know some trad climbers who are like, I can't take on any more people to show them like how to get outside. Maybe, or even just getting into outdoor advocacy, if you had a mentor for that. Like, what are some ways that we can still sort of continue that kind of that model while we have so many people who are like new to climbing, both indoors and out?
Yeah, I can jump in there for a second. So I think having events like this, or even the Flash Foxy, like I went to that event too, and I remember the opening night talking to so many really excited females, and I don't know the statistics, but it seemed like a lot of people I talked to, it was like their first time camping, their first time just going outside, and it was an empowering experience. They'd mostly been climbing in the gym, were interested in going outside, but I feel like the typical path for female climbers is to be drug out by a boyfriend, might be their first round of experience or several experiences. And I can't tell you how many times I've been mid-climb somewhere and there's like a full-scale meltdown and a boyfriend's yelling at the girlfriend, and you know, and it's a negative experience for everyone. And so what are other ways that females, without it being some sort of a relationship or other, you know, expectations, by linking up with, you know, if you want to learn how to trad climb, predominantly you're going to find males who are doing it. So I think having events like this is a great step. And then also just having the confidence to just get out there and do it, even if it is with a guy or your boyfriend or whatever, and kind of be able to stand your ground. And on the advocacy front, I guess it would be the same thing. I mean, that's not the greatest advice, just get out there and do it, but it is creating that space for yourself and applying to things maybe you don't think you're qualified for, and really presenting your best face, and even if you find yourself in a little over your head, like, you set that bar for yourself and push for it now. So that would be my advice. Yeah, just don't get scared off. Yeah.
And look to organizations like yours.
Yeah, and look to organizations that are trying to open the door to make it more inclusive of, you know, females and males. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is, like, I think the old mentorship model is not one that maybe is one that is sustainable at this point. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but when I've spoken with a lot of older climbers who've been climbing for a long time, they're like, if you went out, the assumption was like, it was gonna be that almost everybody there knew how to climb, and there was gonna be one or two new people that would then get taken under the wing, and that's just really not the dynamic that you're gonna see anymore. And I think, it's supporting each other and kind of like showing each other that we can be experts At the Women's Climbing Festival, all of our clinics are led by female every clinic has a female guide and a female athlete, and we have to scour all over the West Coast to find like 9 female guides, which is another problem. That is a whole separate topic, but like, I think for us, it's important to reinforce that we can be the experts, that we can be the decision makers, that we can be the leaders in these climbing situations. I remember I had a male mentor who was great. He taught me how to trad climb. I learned a lot. I gained a lot of trust through that. I gained a lot of skill. And then I found myself going out with other male partners and then thinking, wait, why am I deferring to you? I've climbed more climbs than you. I've done this more. I have more experience, but I find myself deferring to you. Kind of what Anna was talking about is when you're up like with your girlfriends and there's like a hard, scary pitch, you're like, it's your lead. Have fun, Good luck, I'm right here with you. Someone has to get up the climb, someone has to get up the pitch, and it makes you reinforce that confidence, like, hey, we can do this, we can do it together, we can do it as women, we don't need somebody, and it's easy to defer when you see somebody else, like a man, like that is your partner, that you're used to, who's waiting for you to be like, yeah, I'll take it, like, oh yeah, give it to me, oh, or you're scared, cool, I'll take it. Like, with women, like, you're like, well, one of us has to do it. Here we are, 6 pitches up. And I think that helps. That was a huge help for me to reinforce, like, wait, I do know how to do this. So I think like reaching out and like looking to other women and seeing that like they're being experts, you can do that too. You can read the books, you can go out. There are, a lot of ways to get out. There's clinics, there's guides if you have the money, and I recognize that guiding is really expensive. And like just taking the time to meet other women, and I think with the stewardship stuff too, it's really important for all of us to just remember and acknowledge that when we go outside of the gym, we're making an impact, and that we should get involved and invested, that it is our responsibility as climbers, male, female, all climbers, that we're making an impact, and that we should be joining the Access Fund. We should be joining our local local LCOs, local climbing organizations. Thank you. I was like, it's too many acronyms. Local climbing organizations, going out, volunteering, going to adopt a crags and cleaning up, because that's the way we're going to be able to preserve these places. And we can't act the way we used to because there's more of us. If one person throws a piece of trash out, it's not a big deal, but now there's a lot of us, and it makes a big difference.
I want to chime in on that too. She just did what I did to her and said things I was going to say, so we're on the same page. Being a good citizen is important. The wilderness is shrinking. In my opinion, there's just so many people. Like you don't just go somewhere. Again, like 17 years ago, we go to Bishop, and there really wouldn't be very many people around, and you felt very out there. And now there's a lot of people around, and you don't feel very out there. And every single person that goes, and pees behind a rock and leaves toilet paper is like more toilet paper out there, and it sucks. So taking the time to learn from the Access Fund, Leave No Trace, to learn the rules if there's seasonal closures for birds nesting or whatever, for Devil's Tower, making good choices to represent our whole community, but also just be a good citizen of the world and make sure that we're not creating a negative impact in these climbing areas. Because like I personally like to go outside and still feel like I'm outside, and it's not the same as it even was, again, like 17 years ago. It's not the same as it was when we read all these great books about how the valley was in the 70s, but it's just not like that anymore. So it's up to all of us to make sure that we're making good choices. And also, like, if you're going to go bouldering on high balls, you're going to go bouldering in the alpine, you're going to go trad climbing, you're going to try alpine climbing. That you figure out how to do those things. I mean, yeah, there's something to putting yourself out there and learning, but also make good choices so people aren't rescuing you if possible. Make good choices so you aren't injured and having a bad time. Get crash pads and learn how to place them properly and have a spot and try to understand when you should go for it or not. It's okay to not go for it too. And then go back and go for it when you're more prepared. There's choices that you have to make when you're out climbing, and part of what makes this whole thing work is learning what those choices are and learning to make good choices. And we've all done things, I'm sure, that we got away with, but just trying to do, less of that, or trying to at least make sure that when you have the opportunity to do the right thing, that you're doing it, so we can have this experience and new climbers can have this experience moving forward.
Great. On that note, let's open it up. All right, I'm just gonna do a little bit of jogging. Sorry. Excuse me.
I have one question for Shelma. Thanks for bringing up intersectional feminism up. I think it's really important. I remember watching climbing videos as I was growing up, and something that was really concerning for me is that there is a very colonialist perspective with climbers going to different countries and conquering this exotic land. And I remember being obsessed with pilgrimage. Does anyone remember that video? And then looking back years later, being like, "What was I watching? This is so terrible. This is really racist." And so I wanted you have a production company now, and I wanted to know your perspective on that. And then I have another question for Lynn and Beth, if that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have a huge conflict, like, of feelings about mountaineering, too. It's kind of like, we were the first, and you're like, I'm probably sure there's, like, native people in this land who've been climbing this mountain for thousands of years. But cool, good job. No, I think, like, we need to be really intentional about how we present ourselves and how we create accomplishment, and to be more respectful of people who are there. I think climbing, the idea of conquering, it's actually something I've been thinking about a lot. How do you go on an alpine climb, on a mountaineering climb, and like, if it isn't about peak bagging, what is it about? Like, how do you define success if it's not about like getting to the peak, right? So I think that there are different ways for us to measure success in the outdoors, and I'm really excited to like be exploring that myself, as well as like having conversations with other people about how we can kind of change the narrative of how we define success and how we define challenge in the outdoors. With the production company, I think what we're really excited about is that there aren't that many women making films. I think the New York Times did an article about 3 years ago where they said 1% of Hollywood directors are women. 1%. That's crazy. In the outdoor industry, it's probably a really similar percentage, right? And I think what we're trying to say is that it's not that our stories are going to be better than a man's stories, but they're going to be different. You're going to get a different perspective. We might notice something different. What is important to us to show is going to be different, and it's going to just enrich the experience that we're having. It's going to be broader. It's going to be more complex. We're going to see more things, and we're all going to gain from that, And that's really what I'm hoping with the intersectional feminism, is that like, the more women out there that are climbing, it's gonna be better for everyone. It's not just better for us, it's actually better for men too. Like, a lot of my guy friends are like, oh wait, I like climbing with women. Everyone's like cheering me, and they have really good snacks all the time. And I'm like, yeah, do you wanna see any of us hangry? No, that's why we bring good snacks every time. Like, I don't, it's not pretty, guys. Like, always stuff a Snickers bar in my mouth if you start to see it in my eyes. And so, yeah, I think it's a lot of like it's about representation in the media itself, but it's about the storytellers and the decision makers. It's a lot about what Lynn was saying, is that it's awesome that women are in the media more, but if all the decisions about how the story's gonna happen, who's gonna be in the story, how the clothes are made, how we're gonna market that, what our strategy is as a climbing community, are decisions that are made by white men, it's gonna reflect one group of a climbing community that is rapidly not that anymore.
Thank you. And my second question, on the theme of conquering, for pioneers such as yourselves, there aren't that many female pioneers in climbing because it's so hard, and because of the mental game for being a pioneer. And sometimes I wonder about, do we have to lean in, and is that how progress is made, by leaning in and like finding success in the conquering, or like? And I just want to know what your thoughts have been as you've been pioneers in climbing. Thank you.
I'll start off with that one. So the first pre-ascent of the nose in 1993, and then in 94, the one-day ascent, that was kind of like, one thing that I did, but that was a long time ago. And I've personally changed since then, being a mother and just, kind of evolving in my own vision. It kind of bugs me, this whole push towards success and the definition of, the first to do this. And of course that's a, worthy as a title, but actually most of you out there, you're here because you love to climb. That's the definition of success. If you're having a good time, that's what you get out of it. That's what should be celebrated, really. And that's what I think all of you are interested in, is inspiration in terms of being able to relate to the experience of being challenged and digging in deep and learning about yourself, being respectful of the environment, and doing the right thing. That, to me, is the success that we should experience as human beings in our life in all aspects, not just in climbing. So I don't really like this whole push towards the titles and sensationalism. It's not about that. It's about, doing the right thing and doing it for reasons that are personal and not necessarily just to say I've done this or that. Because actually nobody really cares. You should care. It's your experience.
I'll echo that, what Lynn just mentioned. I think for the first 2 decades or, decade and a half that I climbed, it was all about achievement. Can I climb a 13A? Can I climb a 13B? Can I climb 514? Can I do a El Cap route free? Can I try and repeat what Lynn did? Can I push myself farther? Push, to the point where it gets to where you don't enjoy it and you wonder why you came into climbing. Was it to try and conquer things? I know that's not why I started. I went into the climbing gym one day and I had the biggest smile on my face the whole time, and then that's why I kept going back. I recently did this article for Climbing Magazine about being a mother and being a climber, and I wrote it and we went through edits, and then at the end they said, one last thing, one of the editor wants to know, what notable and hard ascents have you done since having Theo? And I said in a very confident way, none, but it's been the most successful and proud 3 years of my life. So I think that climbing is a vehicle to finding yourself. It's a vehicle to how you can explore the world, how you can relate to people, and it shouldn't be necessarily about the achievement. And if it is, then I think those people are doing it for the wrong reasons, and they're not going to be sitting here when they're 75 years old saying they're a climber anymore, which I think is the real success.
I might get some feedback heading this way, so can I bring you? Sorry, thanks.
Hi, my name is Lil, and I basically run the equivalent of Flash Foxy, but in the competitive video gaming world. And so something I've noticed, it's called Smash Sisters, by the way, but effectively, something I've noticed is that there are a lot of women in that scene that have one of the boys club attitudes or internalized misogyny, for a lack of a better term. And I've also seen maybe one article floating around that in the climbing world, and I'm wondering, do you see this a lot in the climbing space, and how do you progress away from that mindset?
Yeah, apparently I take feminism too far. I've been told that. The internet tells me all sorts of things about me. Apparently I hate men, I complain a lot, I take feminism too far. It's what would I know about myself if the internet didn't tell me? No, I think that has to do a lot with kind of these social dynamics that I was talking about, is that we're all complicit in it. It's not just men that promote sexism. It's women can do that as well, because we all grew up in the same society and see systemic issues. For example, I think one really concrete example in my life is the idea of slut shaming, right? I was raised being told that girl is asking for it. If she's wearing that, of course she's being harassed. And that was pounded into my head, as I was growing up. So then I started to think that, oh yeah, of course she's getting harassed. She's wearing those shorts, or she's wearing that top. And I think that there are these, we grew up in this misogynist or more male-dominated, male-centric society. And because of that, we all have these things that we do that we're trying to break down. So for me, it was this light bulb, wait, she should wear whatever she wants, and that doesn't mean, and she should never get harassed. She could be naked and not be objectified and not be harassed. But we're told these things, we're all complicit in it, right? And I think what happens for me, as my experience has been as a woman who, I was a tomboy, I did feel that thing of being competitive and seeing women as competition and thinking there could only be one cool girl, the cool girl who's not like other women, who's not, whiny or complaining or oversensitive or can't take a joke or, all these things. And then coming to the realization that when I'm saying I'm not like those other women, I'm cooler, I'm perpetuating the stereotype that women in general are like that. And we are not. We're not like that, right? So I think it's, even as women, we have these things that we're trying to break down and acknowledge and kind of move forward in. And some women, it's going to take a little bit longer because they're a little bit more steeped in it. And when you agree with men, you gain male privilege. Men are like, you're not like those other women who are always pointing things out. You gain that privilege almost. You're almost accepted into that boys club, and you don't have to deal with a lot of the shit that other women have to deal with. Excuse my language. And so I think it's going to take a long time, but the more we talk about it, the more it's out there. You're thinking, wow, I don't really think there's sexism, but God, everyone keeps talking about it. It keeps coming up in my feed. All these women keep talking about it. Maybe I should think about this. And maybe I should think about maybe how somebody else's experience is different than mine, or maybe that's been my experience and they just haven't even realized it yet, right? So I think the more we talk about it, the more we share our experiences and validate each other's experiences, it's gonna become a bigger movement.
I just wanted to add something. The word tomboy has come up a few times, and I personally take offense to that term tomboy, because I always felt like I was a tomboy, but I was. But that's the term that we go to, because that was the term that was kind of almost derogatory, right? It made me feel less like a girl. So I say, be yourself, whatever that is. Be you. That's the best you can be, is be you. It doesn't have to be defined in terms of the old archetype of what society has said. And for a woman to succeed in a man's world, we should not take the man's approach. We should not be looking at that example. We need to be women and use our women's approach, or whatever your approach, as a person. It doesn't have to be gender related. Just do what feels right. And it doesn't have to be judged either way. It's a human approach.
Hey, so I'm also a downhill mountain biker, and in Oregon there's a group called No Apologies that goes out and tries to promote the fact that women tend to apologize for just existing all the time. And you all are up there doing such a great job confidently answering these questions, as you should. But I look around the gym and I see people, especially females, climbing, and we're always inclined to apologize when we can't do something, or we fall and we look and we say, oh, I'm sorry. And I think that promotes a really negative feeling. How have you all gotten past that, and how do you recommend to newer climbers or female climbers to believe in yourself and have confidence?
I say stop saying sorry, I'm gonna tie you off and leave you up there. No, I do notice that as well, and I think a lot of times we do it. We're like, oh my God, I'm sorry I fell, and you're like, that's the point of trying hard. You want to, and I think that it's, for me, it's acknowledging it, that we're doing it, and trying to stop it, and letting women feel comfortable and saying, hey, you don't have to say sorry.
I'll just say one quick thing. Just recognizing and self-reflection and noticing that sort of, I call it a red flag, when there's something that doesn't feel right, ooh, I just said sorry. Why am I saying that? And then over time, you could change that if you just reflect and realize that you're falling into a pattern that doesn't feel right. So just ask yourself the right question and make sure that you're being authentic in the way it actually should be, instead of what you assume in your habits and roles that have been sort of, pound into you since you were a little kid.
I was going to say, Lynn actually nailed it there, but I was just going to say, I am definitely guilty of that. And even in my work, I find in emails, I actually am on the side of, we get all the issues going on come to me. So I get a lot of the anger of the climbing community essentially coming at me. And my instinct, even professionally, is to say you're sorry. And this maybe also plays into this that fine line of not playing into acting like a man, but I've had to catch myself. It's almost like sometimes opening yourself up to the pack of wolves. If you say you're sorry, then there's that fine line of being authentic to yourself, and then also just catching, that trend, because I think it's a really common thing. And also I think it's, on the flip side, okay to show emotion, right? So I think that's finding that line of not being really stoic if you're feeling emotion, or why are you actually saying sorry? Are you frustrated? Are you upset? Like Lynn said, kind of looking a little deeper into that, and maybe expressing whatever that true emotion is. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally do that all the time still. I always have. But partially I just want people to feel comfortable. It's not about me like making myself smaller. It's just like, I'm sorry you're feeling that way, or like, yeah, I'm sorry that I'm freaking out, because it's like, it's not that cool to freak out at the crag, for example, or whatever. But one of the things I noticed when I first moved to Colorado, I was 22, and then like a year or two later, I was working on a book project, and I interviewed Lynn for like 8 hours, because neither of us were like, we were both too polite to be like, "Are we done?" She fed me lunch, she fed me dinner. It was like, I was like 22. I was like, this is amazing. But the thing I took away the most from interviewing her was that she is able to full on, straight in the face, with confidence, talk about the things that she's done without apologizing for them or feeling like she's bragging or anything, because she did them, like she did the nose all free in a day. Like those things happened, and it's totally okay and inspiring and empowering, and all those words that are like, they get misused a little bit, but for her to be at the top of her game and be comfortable with that. And I've noticed, talking to a few other pro athletes who are at the top of their game, that's a common thing, having that confidence. It's not bragging, it's just, yeah, she knew she could do it, or she didn't know she could do it, but she did it, and she knows she did it, and there's no reason that, anybody at Beth should be at all ashamed of ever being like, yeah, I did this thing, somebody, and no one has been able to do it. Like, that's cool, great, amazing job, and she shouldn't have to feel like she should make that smaller to make anybody else comfortable, but that's a thing that I find myself and other women doing, overcorrecting on that. So it was really inspiring for me, and I think about things that Lynn said to me at that interview 13 years ago still, because it was one of the first, and again, I feel like I was raised around strong women, but not strong women who were comfortable with their achievements and had achievements like Lynn's, because basically almost no one does. So yeah, and I don't know what the answer is for not doing that, because I do it all the time, and I'm not sure how not to. I don't like people looking at me, really. I'm just like trying to learn to be comfortable, because I think that things like, I think female route setting is super important, and I think getting more women to set routes is super important, and to do these events is super important, and it's been really challenging for me in a lot of ways to work with groups of men that are not my group of men. So my group of men, we got it worked out. But then I go work with other men from all over the country, and then there's this whole new thing again. And we're not in the boys club, and there's just no way almost to be in the boys club. So what do you do? So it's constant. So it's really nice to have women who don't apologize for their existence. And the rest of us can try to learn how to not do that. And then also, like, be a good citizen, so you shouldn't be apologizing for your existence. Like, recognize when you should and be like, because, yeah. Yeah, okay. That's all I got.
Back? Are we good? Cool.
So I've been able to go on the road and travel by myself climbing a lot, and I thought this was just a me problem until I ran into a couple other females that also had the same problem. Once I would climb with one guy, it was like I was claimed. Like, none of the other guys, and I don't date men, so it was kind of like I was claimed by this guy, and I'm only allowed to climb with this guy individually. Like, I could go out in the group with everybody, but then all of the other guys kind of were standoffish of like, this is the person that he gets to climb with. Do you have any suggestions either on assertiveness or mindset of kind of how to be like, no, everybody, you can still climb with me?
Have you tried just asking other guys to go climbing with you individually? Have you tried being like, I don't date men and I'm not going to date any of you, so do you want to spot me on my project or not? Yeah, I have this thing where I'm either apologizing or I'm like overly blunt apparently, and so I'm totally the kind of person that would be like, this is super dumb, like, will you please come spot me? I need some help or something. And I think more women should be like that too, because like one of the things I really like about hanging out with people from Europe is that you don't, with the language barrier, you like lose euphemism, and it's amazing. You can just say what you're thinking, and they say what they're thinking, and it's like very clear what's happening, and it's very like much. So try to do that. And if you need to think of like, you know, like Lynn, like I think of Lynn, I'm like, oh, Lynn wouldn't deal with this, and that's been helpful to me in my life. So maybe like try something like that.
I have a question for Lynn. Back when you were a stone master, the men that you were with, do you feel like John Long, who I know he probably said inspired you to say that you could, you know, climb the nose one day or free it? Do you think the group of men that you were with at that time were, you know, helping inspire you? Were they treating you equal? Were you just happened to be with a good group of men, or were you fighting within that group once you became a stone master?
Well, I think that it was such a small community of climbers that I felt like we were bonded by this common passion to push ourselves as free climbers. And there was kind of both sides. Sometimes, you know, I was encouraged, like John did say, hey, Linny, you should go up and try to free climb the nose because you have small fingers. And but he sincerely wanted to see me succeed. And it didn't occur to me that I should be trying to push things. It wasn't actually my goal. I was just out having fun. But then when I realized, oh yeah, we could do the first ascent of this, and it wasn't like male or female, it wasn't so much gender related. But there were some, well, one in particular, an instance where we were climbing in Telluride, Colorado, and there was this area called the Overbroke, and there was a route, really amazing, overhanging wall, and it was probably one of the first 513s. Actually, Tony Yanero did the first 513 that I know of in the world in Lover's Leap. And so that existed, but he worked on it. He just he had a roadmap of every single handhold and foothold, and he was kind of actually criticized because people were like, oh, you were hangdogging and you were doing all this stuff. But anyway, so it was a little bit ahead of its time, and the first part of it was kind of reachy. And John is like 6'2", and you know, it wasn't a problem for him, and he's also very powerful. So he got through the bottom part, but then the crack was kind of a thin crack, and so my little hands did actually fit into the crack. So as soon as I worked out the bottom section, when I got to the crack, I just kept going. And I did the first ascent of it, and he was kind of bummed out about it, but not overtly. It would have been bad style to show that he was upset about it. But I had a client years later who observed our interaction, and he wrote a story called Meeting Linny. He didn't know who I wasn't famous, but he noticed this dynamic, and it was right on. He was not happy about it. And afterwards, I saw the guidebook, and it listed his name first. So, you know, there were little dynamics like that happened because, you know, he didn't really want to be behind me in the recognition of that route. So I don't know whose fault it was that they got it wrong, but maybe it was an assumption that John did it first. But actually, you know, it was kind of a team project, and in those days we did what's called yo-yoing, where the first person would go up and they'd get the rope up at the high point, and if they fell, they'd come down, because you weren't actually supposed to be hangdogging. So then you'd turn it over to the next person. So you kind of had a top rope up to that same point, and then you'd push it on. So it was kind of like a cooperative project, but usually when somebody does the first ascent, their name is first. So there was a little bit of that stuff going on, but in general, I would say that I didn't feel any chip on my shoulder about that. it was just the normal kind of stereotypes and go-to assumptions that we've been dealing with our whole life.
Got time for, whoa, sorry. We got time for a couple more questions. Burning, all right. What's the feedback on this?
Yeah, don't worry. Hi, my name is Sarah, and so I found something that you said really familiar to me, like how when you've kind of become accepted into the male community or like this group, then you kind of get this privilege and you don't have to deal with a lot of the shit that other people have to deal with. I found that's really true for me. But kind of speaking to that, like all of my climbing mentors have been male. I really like climbing strong. I really like being strong. And so I come up with like, I can climb most of the problems that my male peers can, but what I don't have is like the head game. And the things that get my male peers really psyched on problems just don't get me psyched. And I have confidence that I am completely capable of doing a climb, but I struggle actually getting there. So I was just wondering if you guys had any tips that I might not be getting from my male peers for obvious reasons. And if you guys just had any advice in trying to find that confidence to do what you're actually capable of and achieve the best that you can do.
I think we tend to encourage people the way, it makes sense, we tend to encourage people the way we want to be encouraged, or the way that we respond best to, right? So I'm going to encourage you the way, so like, you know, I want people to shout encouragement at me, like while I'm on a hard sport climbing, like, go. I want you to be like, you can do it, like, we're with you, that's awesome, like, keep going, breathe, because I always forget, you know, like, that's what feels good to me. But I have other friends who've told me, like, hey, I find that really distracting. It actually, like, makes me feel kind of tense. Like, I would rather not have that being said. And, like, it's kind of a recognition, like, oh, what's working for me that I want to share with you is maybe not what's working best for you. And so I think what can be really challenging is if you climb with a certain group of people that all respond in the same way. So like maybe saying just stand up works for some people, like doesn't work for me. Like I'm like, seriously, like can you, like, that's no. So I mean, I think like something that might just be different is that like they, because of, you know, I don't want to generalize, but maybe like whatever their upbringing, their confidence, having been told that they can do it all the time, whatever, I don't know these male partners that you climb with, like that they are all supporting each other in a way that works for them. That might not be the most effective way for you to get through your mental barriers. Maybe having someone say, it's okay to be scared. If you want to like, hey, do you want me to boost you into that position so you can feel that hold and you can see how that feels? Do you want to try falling while we're all like right here so you can try to see how it feels? Do you want to go practice falling in the gym in a similar move so that you can do it there before you come back out here? There are all these different ways that we can work through our mental barriers. And I think just recognizing that one way of that might work for one person is not going to work for somebody else. So I think like looking out to other people that might have had similar barriers to you and asking, how did you get past that? How did that work for you? What worked for you? And you might find somebody whose method is like relevant to you.
So I just have to chime in just one little thing. Old schoolers, we used to, the word sandbag. Does everybody know what sandbag is? Okay, so an example. Yeah, go do that route, it's really good. And they know that they were scared out of their minds on that route. But they want you to go and try it so you're scared so that they feel like, oh yeah, they're scared on that route. And really what that means, if you translate back to the meaning of it, is like everybody's scared. Those guys you climb with, when it's scary up there, they're scared too, but you don't see it. They don't show it. They're trying to be stoic, maybe. I'm just making an assumption. But I think it's probably in their minds good for them not to show that they're scared because they've been taught, go for it, you know, it's okay to fail, whatever. They just appear to deal with risk better, but they've had to do the same thing that you have to do, and that is accept you're scared. Okay, but I've decided to go for it. I'm here right now, and I'm going to push through because I've decided that it's a reasonable thing. Even if this unknown is scary, you're probably not going to die if you fall. Make sure that they're spotting you and not just like hands in the pocket. You know, go for it when it feels right for you, and know that you're gonna be scared and be prepared for it. And then you just kind of like shift gears. I call that the mental shift, where you recognize it as the red flag, and then you make a decision even before you step off the ground. When I get there and I'm scared, I'm gonna shift and focus on that next hold, and I'm gonna go for it because I'm ready to go for it. When you're ready to go for it, just accept that you'll be scared.
Yeah, and that was kind of all finding your own process, kind of a combination of what they just said. Like, you know, a lot of times when I go climbing with men, they have a ton more energy than I have for some reason. Like, they are on top of the boulder, they're below the boulder, they're looking at other boulders, they're back at the boulder, they're on the boulder, they're on the boulder, they're on the boulder, they're on the boulder, you know, and I'm just like, okay, is it my turn? And then, you know, making it your turn. And I actually have girlfriends that are like that too, where I just cannot get a word in. I'm just like, can I just brush that? Can I just get on it before you try it for the 12th time? So just finding out what your process is to center yourself so you can have the mental strength to do what these guys are saying, like these girls are saying, to take your, like for me, my friend Allie Dory, I don't know if you guys have ever heard her name, but she was like a pioneer woman boulderer for a lot of years. She was out there living on the road. She was climbing all kinds of stuff. She's a doctor now because she just got tired of being a good rock climber. I don't know. She's still a good rock climber. She's like an overachiever. But I started bouldering with her more when I moved to Colorado, and you know, she would take a nap on the pads like while we were climbing. You know, I would be trying to keep trying because like, oh, I think we can do this, whatever. And she would like figure it out kind of mentally, like, okay, here's what I have to do. And she would take a nap or whatever, just to calm herself down and chill for 10 minutes or 15 minutes and not worry about everybody else maybe being in a hurry and not worry about whatever. And then she would get up and like brush the holes and like put her shoes on and then do the thing. You know, and she would just have decided like, we're not leaving till I do it. I can do it, and I need to rest a little bit before I do it, or like have a snack or whatever, and just find. And that helped me a lot. And again, I try to like, I think about things Lynn said. I think about the way that Allie does that when she's bouldering still, to think, okay, it's go time now for me. So that's my own process, you know, and the men that I've spent a lot of time climbing with will have climbed, they've tried the problem 12 more times while I was doing that. So she's got to find your own process and be okay with having your own process. Because like they're saying, what works for them isn't going to work for you. And when you're going to make like red flag decisions, you want to make sure that you're ready for those decisions.
All right, we got one final question.
My name is Randy. I've been climbing for about 2 years now, and one of the things that I really like about climbing is that it's forced me to kind of look at myself when I'm climbing on the wall and find that kind of thin line between I'm just scared and I need to push through, or I should listen to my gut and that I'm gonna get hurt if I do this. And I'm kind of constantly, that line's moving for me as I climb more and as my abilities grow. And I was just wondering, for you guys, like, have you gotten to a place where you are just really confident in where that line is for yourself, or does it still continue to move as you continue on in your journey of climbing?
So for me, that line is consistently moving. The thing that stays the same is when I decide to go, everything goes. So if I'm gonna make a red flag decision, I like that term, I've never heard that before, so that's a good one. If I'm faced with a red flag decision and I decide, you know, I'm gonna do this, everything stops around me and I go for it. But where that line is, it changes all the time. Yeah, that's what I have to say about that.
Yeah, I'm definitely the same with Anna. I mean, I think the best thing you can do is listen to your gut. And I mean, humans are changing every single minute of every single day. And for me, I'll feel strong one day and confident, and the next day I haven't slept and I haven't climbed in a while or whatnot. And I think it's the most important and the strongest asset you have is listening to yourself.
Any final thoughts from you all? Thank you. Woo! There it is. Before we conclude the panel.
I just want to say that despite all of these things, which are real things are changing really fast. There are more and more women involved in climbing industry companies, like you guys that put on this amazing event here at Touchstone, which has just turned into this huge thing. And hopefully it'll turn into more huge things. And the events that Shelma's putting on. And I just think that, we are moving forward, and it's really important to, instead of fighting against the old ways, just kind of embrace everybody moving forward, and so we can all find like a new, better way to be in the future.
Can I say one thing on the mentor thing? This is not me preaching, but headphones, people. When you're out at the crag, headphones, not boom boxes, headphones. Yes.
I feel like that was the end, but I'm just gonna say something anyway. Sorry. I just want to say, like, these topics are really complicated. They're really complex, and so don't feel like I certainly oftentimes people will be like, well, so there's this woman problem. I'm like, are we a problem? Okay, but they're like, well, so what's the answer? And I'm like, I don't have the answer. There is no the answer. Like, we're all trying to figure it out together, and I'm only one person with my experience and my, what I've been taught and what I've learned and what I'm gaining. And I think the way we're gonna figure this out is continue to have these larger conversations that include all of us, and creating space for that, and being generous with people whose experiences might not be the same as yours, and being patient and learning and knowing that we're all trying to figure it out together. And it's gonna take a while, because this is much more than one thing. It's a deep-seated issue that comes from all different parts of our lives.
Okay, I'll say one more thing. So the word feminism has always bothered me because it sounds like chauvinism. Because why isn't it just equalism? Like equalist. I feel like it should be equal and not partial. But the reason that the word exists is because we've had a hard run. Women have not had it equal in business. We're still not making the same as men in an equal job. Still to this day, it's not even a law that women get paid the same for the same job. So that's why the term exists, and I just think that it needs to be just a little bit more, softened a little bit, but the awareness is the important thing. And I think we should be proud to be who we are and embrace our fears and move forward if we want to. We shouldn't feel like we have to or that we should do. It's just be yourself and be compassionate to other people and be accepting of ourselves and other people and all of our differences, because that diversity in the world is what makes the world beautiful.
Thank you all so much for the generosity of your time and energy, and for sitting up here for an hour and a half. And thank you all for sitting here for an hour and a half and coming to Woman Up. Thank you to our camera folks and to Heather for live streaming, holding my phone the entire time. We don't have a tripod for that. So I just want to let you all know that you're welcome to save your seats, but this concludes the panel. Lynn Hill will be giving her presentation in about half an hour. We still have snacks and beverages in the back, and thank you again so much. This is so amazing. Give yourselves a round of applause.
Thanks to the men, too, that came to support all the women. It was awesome. All you men out there that supported us, thank you.
Should we do a giant selfie? Should we do a giant selfie? Okay.
Everyone get in there. One, two, three. Awesome. Thank you.
All right, enjoy. We'll reconvene in about half an hour.